Hello, welcome to the training webinar. I'm Dale Franks, and today we are going to talk about calendar knowledge views. So last week we talked about knowledge views and we got into them in quite a bit of detail. However, I left out one type of knowledge view, which is the calendar knowledge view, which enables you to actually see a calendar of events, or as I'll show you today, a list of travel journeys that you might want to record. Any sort of thing that can be displayed in a calendar can be displayed in a calendar knowledge view. So I have an application that I will go ahead and share, and we will take a look at the application. And once we do that, we will rebuild that application so you can see how a calendar knowledge view works. So I have a form, which is a pretty simple form. We're actually going to go through it in a lot of detail that allows us to put in some travel records. And I'll just take a look at one that has already been completed. So we'll take a look at one that I did yesterday in prep. And so here's the form. It's a pretty simple form. There's this section down here that we're going to get into in some detail a bit later. In a production system, we would never see this. It would be hidden. And for the moment, I'm going to hide it here. This is our actual form. This is more or less what the user will see when they open it up. And basically, it is just in this case, it's just the ability to log your travel. So in this particular case, I left San Diego yesterday morning at 8:45, drove up to Los Angeles, got there about 10:45, stuck around there for a little bit, did some stuff. Then I left Los Angeles at 2 p.m. and drove out to Oxnard, and I got there about 3:30 p.m. in Oxnard, and that is my trip itinerary. Normally I would do something where I would go and come back, but we only really need to see one trip. So I have one trip from yesterday. And of course, today I'll make another trip, and I'll need to, simply so that we can see all this stuff down here at the very bottom of the form and see how it works. But for right now, this is fine. This is my form instance. By the way, there's no timeline or anything. It's just the form. And that's my trip. And so I have a couple of calendar K views to look at that trip. Now, because that is an array form and there are two legs to my journey, I really have two ways that I can show this trip. One way in which I can show this trip, and we'll open this, and as you can see, I've done this webinar before, so you can see some of the old trips there, but for this week, I can turn this on and I can see I've got my entire trip. Now, there were two legs to this trip. There were two rows in that array on the form we just looked at. But I've concatenated all of that into a single calendar item that will show me when I started, which was yesterday at 8:45, and when I finished, which was yesterday at 3:30. Now, this shows me the entire trip. That may be the way that I want to look at it. On the other hand, I have a second calendar knowledge view. And I'll update and run this one, and you will notice it has many, many more records. Now, this particular knowledge view, I'm actually looking at each row in the array. And normally, whenever you incorporate array rows into a knowledge view, you will get a knowledge view row for each row in the array. So for my trip yesterday, which was trip number 61, it's right down here. I have my first row in my array, which shows up here, which is my trip from San Diego to Los Angeles. And then there's the second leg of the trip, which is Los Angeles to Oxnard. Now, in this particular case, when I go to the calendar, what I'm seeing are my actual travel times. So I've got some choices here in how I want to present this information in a calendar based on whether I want to see the entire trip or whether I want to see each individual leg of the journey. And of course, there are are pros and cons to each method of doing that. Obviously, if I just want to block off the whole amount of time, I need to concatenate the array fields into a single field, which, as you'll see, will get us back into something that we talked about last week whenever we were talking about knowledge views. If I just want to show the actual travel times, then I can show it this way, and I don't have to concatenate the data in the array fields. I can just show the individual array rows, and it shows up the actual times when I was physically on the road and traveling. Obviously, you may want to see both of those views, and we're going to cover how we do that today. Before we get into that, though, let's actually take a look at where all of this is configured. It's one tab that we didn't talk about last week when we were talking about knowledge views, and that was here, the calendar tab. Now, this is a pretty simple way of viewing our data, this calendar, and it's pretty simple to configure. I just need 4 settings to make my calendar work. I need the subject, the name, so the actual text that will be displayed inside of each calendar entry. I need a column for the start date, column for the end date. So I need to know when my start time was and my end time was for each appointment that I'm going to show on the calendar. And then I have the ability to set a color. We're going to use a little wizardry to have different people with different colors in their calendar so that we can see a different calendar item. So let's start by taking a look at my form, because we're going to want to build both of these knowledge views today. So to do that, we have to do something a little bit special with our form. Now, one thing that I didn't do for the demo part was I didn't actually create a new form instance. So I'm going to update and run a new form instance. We're just going to fill this out, and then we're going to look at the calendar real fast so that we can see the 2 calendar entries, and then we'll get into the details of how all this gets built so that we can generate this calendar K view. Because unlike a regular knowledge view where I just look at some specific fields on the form, I'm going to have to do, as I said earlier, at least for one of these knowledge views, a little bit of wizardry to make all of this work, and I'll explain all of that as we go. So for right now, I do not want to be the traveler today. I'm going to change it to, I think, Diana. So Diana Stewart is my traveler. And let's say that Diana is going to leave Oceanside, and she's going to leave Oceanside, we'll just say this morning at 9:30, and she's going to go to San Clemente, and she's going to get to San Clemente. Let's see, if she leaves at 9:30, she should probably get there at 10:15-ish or so, depending on how traffic works. And we'll add another trip. We'll add her return trip. So she's going to go from San Clemente, and she's going to leave San Clemente today at, let's say 2:15, and she's going to head back to Oceanside, and she's going to arrive in Oceanside, we'll say at 3 o'clock. So let's find 3 o'clock. There we go. And that's really all we're going to do. Actually, I should probably send her to another city. Let me make this a 3-leg journey here. I'm going to add another trip. And in this case, let's say she went from San Clemente to Laguna Beach. And, well, BEACH. So she went to Laguna Beach. If she left at 2:15, she'd probably get to Laguna Beach a little earlier. So we'll say 2:45. And then she left Laguna Beach. And let's say she left Laguna Beach at 4 o'clock and she get back to Oceanside. Let's say, sometime around 5:15 or so because of afternoon traffic. And I hit the event button for a reason. There's a reason why it's there. This normally wouldn't be there in a regular form. I clicked it so that we actually see down here at the bottom, I've got some destinations that she went to. So I've actually got my trip showing up here of where she went: San Clemente, Laguna Beach, Oceanside. And then I have another one here that just shows San Clemente and Laguna Beach. Doing some different things with this. So one is showing the entire itinerary, one is just showing destinations. There's a reason for that. We'll explain that later. For right now, I've got my trips. I'm happy with this. This is trip number 65, and it's today 2/22/04. So I'm going to go ahead and submit that. And now that that is submitted, I can go into Calendar K-View 1. I can update and run it. It shows me my logical view of the knowledge view, but then on my calendar view, we see this. And notice that Diana Stewart has her own custom color as opposed to mine, which is this blue color. Diana gets blanched almond, I believe, is the color that she gets. And similarly, when we go into Calendar 2, and we run that one and we look at this week's schedule, we can see the 3 legs of the journey that Diana made to San Clemente, then to Laguna Beach, and then back to Oceanside. So how do we get here from our form? Now I will switch over here into my webinar trip form on this side, and we will take a look at the form itself. So this form is a little bit different. I've already built it. You know what? Since I've already built it and we've already done stuff, I thought I'd go through and rebuild the thing. I think rather than taking the time to do that, now that I'm thinking about it, we're going to go back to our old form, the one that we've been using, and we'll just look at that one. I know it's fully configured, so we'll just take a look at what we're doing. There is some information I need to make the Calendar K-View work. I need those 4 fields. I need a name of a trip. Now, I'm largely going to have to derive that from other form fields. I need to know who's going to be going on the trip. When there's just some text I need to display, that I'm going to derive based on what I enter into the form, one of which is going to be the name of the traveler. So I've got a user picker where I can specify who the traveler is. By default, when I open the form, this user picker is set to pick me. So it is set to pick whoever the form submit user is. That would normally be the way that you would do something like this. You would expect the person who is filling out the travel log would be the person who is the one traveling. So we're just going to default it to whoever is submitting the form. But because it's a user picker, and in this case, most of the time when we throw the submitter on the form, it's a hidden field. And I probably would do that in any event on a normal form in production. I would actually have a user picker that would identify the submitter. And then I might not have a default value at all for the form submit user, except that I do want to assume that the form submitter is the person for whom the travel record is being written, but that might not universally be true. Obviously, someone else might fill out a travel record for you. So this is an editable field so that we can make a change there. I have my submission date. That's basically for administrative purposes to know when we submitted it. And then I have the trip number. Now, the trip number itself is just a sequence number, I believe, which doesn't, it's sequence number trips. There it is. It just puts in a trip number and supplies a trip number automatically. Yes, I do recognize that this is a default value. So if I open the form and don't actually submit it, I will have burned that number. But I'm doing it this way in this case, since I don't really need a process So therefore, I'm just going to use form instances, and I will set the number anytime I open the form. Although you might notice if we look back at the logical view of the knowledge view that I've skipped a lot of trip numbers, largely because I will have run the form, not submitted it, and closed it, and I will have burned that sequence number that supplies the trip number here. So whenever you use sequence numbers, just as a general practice, always remember if you do things on the form with sequence numbers, when I open up the form, it tends to burn those sequence numbers. You probably wouldn't want to do that. You would probably, as we've discussed many times, want to have your very first activity in a process timeline to set the value of the trip number. That way, you know a trip number doesn't burn a sequence number until a form has been submitted. So let's talk about my array. Now, because it is an array, I'm using array columns. Now, what I've done here, as opposed to the other form that we were looking at a minute ago, I've just gone ahead and put in the text directly into the form so that we can actually see what these form fields are. If we look at the other form, I just want you to notice, as a best practice, I did this. I didn't make any changes, so let's go ahead and proceed. If we look at the other form, I just want you to notice what I've done. Each of these items are in their own system variable control. So here's my array column text right there, and I've encapsulated it in a control. Now, I kind of like this because it encapsulates everything inside a system variable control. I can run any system variable I want. So all of my array columns are basically set up in system variables. I've done the same thing here with the departure time. We can't use the date picker from the UI, this field right here, this add a date picker field. We can't use it because I need to use times. Look, I suppose we could use it. There is a date time picker. So I could have used the UI control, but I wanted to have specific time increments in the dropdown. So I'm going to use the control tag. Control tags, of course, are system variables. So I used the system variable control. So I've set up these with the system variable controls because I think visually it makes the form a lot simpler. It does require that you click on a control to actually see what the system variable is. This is what I would recommend that you do just so that everything is encapsulated. However, for ease of training, in this particular case, to see everything all at one time, I've just added the text in right on the design surface. And you can do that, by the way, because these are all system variables. So Process Director will convert them to the appropriate items. In this case, the array column. That's actually a control, although it just shows up as text when the form runs. But this is the reason that we have the array column as the header for each of the arrays is so that if we scrunch the form down to a small viewport, it maintains the labeling for each one of the items on each row of the array. So array columns are really great to throw in whenever you want to have a responsive form and you want to ensure that all of the columns get the appropriate labeling that they need for accessibility purposes. So I've got label controls at the very top using the array column control. I've just got a text field here, which is my departure location, and similar, a destination in this field. Those are just text fields. But what I had to do here is I had to throw in the date time form control tag, as I said earlier, rather than using the date picker or date time picker from the UI. There's two reasons for this. First of all, I have specific intervals that I want to use. A regular date time picker control will show you all 24 hours in a date, and it will be in 1 hour increments. So we'll start at 1 a.m. and go all the way to 2400. Or is it the other way around? Does it go to 12 a.m. to 2300? Not sure, don't remember off the top of my head. The important thing is it only gives me 24 options because there are only 24 hours in the day. It also shows me the entire day. I don't want to do that in this case. I have some special things I want to do. I only want to show 15-minute intervals. I can't do that with the regular control. So I already need to use the date time control to make this happen, to show my times in 15-minute increments. And I also don't want to show the entire 24-hour period, because whatever 24 times 4 is, that would be how many options I had. So that would be something like 96, I think. That would be a lot of options. So I'm only going to show from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. So I'm only going to show 12 hours of the day in 15-minute increments. So it's going to limit what gets shown. And to do either of these two things, either to have a custom interval other than 1 hour or to have custom start and end times, I have to use the date time control tag. I cannot use any of the UI controls that are up here in the toolbar. Great. Well, this is in an array. Obviously, it's an array called trip array. And that was the wrong thing. I clicked the wrong control. This was what I wanted, trip array. So that's my array. So this gives me the fields that I need for the calendar, which is my departure time and my arrival time. I'm going to need those as my start and end time for activities. Of course, I've got a button to add a trip. I have an event button. The only reason that it's here is so that I can force an event to fire so that we can see changes happen in this bottom field. And of course, I have a remove last button, which would just remove the last row in the array. So that's it. That's the main part of my form. That's what makes everything work, at least as far as Calendar KView 2 goes. At this point, I now have a form that will enable me to track each of the legs of the journey. I don't need anything else to make Calendar KView 2 work. And as we go through the configuration for Calendar KView 2, we'll see that, because we'll see what fields I'm using and how that KView works. So when we'll rebuild that Calendar KView to see the appropriate data. Of course, I got a button area control. That's fine. We know what that does. Then I've got this section here. This is basically a set of concatenation fields that I need to have set up to make this work. Okay, I don't know what it was telling me I didn't have text for, but okay, whatever. Here's my section. Normally, I would hide this in production. I have it in a section so that I can, in fact, hide all of these controls all at the same time. I have not done so, but I need these controls. The problem that I have with using an array, of course, well, I've got two things I need to do. Number one, I need to track each of the legs of the journey. So I need to know when somebody left and when somebody arrived. And each of those legs of the journey need to be logged separately if I'm going to have like a stop or a layover or whatever. Obviously, if it's a plane flight and there's like a 2-hour layover in Dallas, we wouldn't count that because we're not doing anything but hanging out in the airport. And when we finally get to, I don't know, Boston or wherever, Atlanta, that's my trip. San Diego to Atlanta. And that's one leg of the trip. Then, of course, I have the return leg from Atlanta back to San Diego. In general, I'm going to have an outbound leg and an inbound leg for my trip. Now, in most cases, those travels are, I need to know what the travel days are, and I need to know how long the travel was. There may be a variety of reasons for this. I may need to pay special for travel. There may be per diem payments, whatever it may be. And I need to be able to do that calculation. Now, with the array field, that's fine. I can track all of that. And I can track each of those individual legs of the journey, as we saw in Calendar KView 2 previously. I need to be able to have the entire, I just mentioned per diem, or I might have to pay per diem. Well, I need to know how long I need to pay that per diem from. in that perspective, while I might need to know the travel times for some other administrative purpose, for assigning per diem, if I get paid, whatever the per diem rate is, $100 a day to go to Dallas, fine, I need to know how long I need to pay that $100 a day. So in that case, I need to have the entire length of the trip. When did they leave San Diego? And when did they get back to San Diego? I don't really care that they went from San Diego to Dallas, except that Dallas has its own per diem rate. So I don't need to know how long it took him to get there. I don't need to know how long it took him to get back. What I do need to know is how long were they in Dallas in total? That's the per diem I need to pay. So if they're there for the entire week, if they're there for Monday through Friday, I'm going to need to pay them 5 days of per diem for that trip. Okay, great. Well, the trouble is that now that I have everything in an array, I need to be able to concatenate all of those different array fields into one single record. And so the purpose of the bottom half of this form is to concatenate however many rows I might have in this array down to distill it to a single record. When did the trip start? When did the trip end? Now I know what the length, the overall length of my trip was, and then I have some other information here that I want to throw in or concatenate just in terms of creating the text that I need. Quite honestly, the only two fields I really need are these two date fields here, which is my trip start and my trip end. Everything else I'm doing here, I'm largely doing just because I want to do it, because it's kind of cool to do. To do all of this concatenation, to do it on the form, well, I'm going to need a set form data running that actually sets all of these values. So let's take a look at how we're setting all these values. And by the way, I'm sorry we're spending so much time on the form itself, but at least I'm not making you watch me rebuild it from scratch. But it's important in order to make Calendar KView 1 work the way that we want it to work. We have to do this sort of concatenation. By the way, you notice I haven't talked about this Calendar KView 1, the one that says Alt. I will in a minute, and I'll tell you why we're going through all of this stuff in the form with all of these status fields. There is a reason. It isn't just for, this is kind of cool. So let's look at the form itself, the form definition itself, and let's go into our set form data tag or data tab. On the form display event, which means it fires basically anytime any form event fires, whether it's a button or what have you, part of what happens with a form event is a server round trip, which causes the form to reload. Even if nothing happens on the server, the form will still reload. So anytime a form event fires, I know that in conjunction with that form event, the very last thing that's going to happen is it's going to run a form display event. So, if I change the value of a field, that may prompt a, field event. It's going to go to the server to do that event. When it comes back from the server, the form is always going to refresh. So on any form event that fires, the very last thing that's going to happen is an additional event. Form display is going to fire when the form refreshes. So when the form refreshes, there's a couple of things that I need to do, which is to set all of those fields. So I need my trip start and my trip end. That I've absolutely got to have. I've got to have those date fields set so that I know what my overall trip is. So what I've done is I've had to take my array and concatenate it. So for my trip start, I need a specific departure time, and that is the very first departure time that will appear in my array. We are going to assume that the array from top to bottom is going to show each leg of the trip in chronological order. If you don't do it in chronological order, none of this works. So it's kind of important that people put their data entry in chronological order. But assuming that they do that, then I need two pieces of data. The first thing I need is that departure time field, but I only need it from the very first row of the array. That's when the trip started. So I'm going to use the row num formatter to just specify I only want row number 1 for the trip start. So on my form, it will give me the very first start of my trip. Then on the trip end, I need to again use a system variable. This time I look at the arrival time field. That's when it ended, but I only want the one from the very last row of the array. So I'm going to use the row num formatter. And by the way, let's just make this bigger while we're here so that you can actually, and let's turn off our content list so we can actually see what we're doing here. In fact, let's embiggen it once more and we can see. I think this will be much more legible to you over Zoom. So I'm looking at the arrival time field. Again, I'm using the row num formatter, and I'm setting the row num formatter to a system variable called trip array. Now, if you remember, the array is named trip array. Now, arrays, although we don't normally think of them as being data fields, are in fact data fields. They do have a value. The value of an array is the number of rows that the array contains. So if I had 3 rows in trip array, the value of trip array would be 3. So this allows me to set my row number equal to the value of trip array. And if the value is 3, then that means I'm going to see the arrival time field from row 3 in the array. And so it will always show me the last row. By the way, there is an alternative way I can do this. I wouldn't necessarily, but technically I could get away with, instead of using the trip array form field, which I think is the best thing to do, but technically I could pull number of rows. I do have an alternative system variable that I could use to just count number of rows. And again, as long as I am in this form context, I'm in the context of the array, num underscore rows will actually return the number of rows in that array, since this is an array field. So technically, I could do that. I tend not to do that. I tend to actually use the trip array system variable. There's a couple of reasons for that. While num rows will work in this context, I prefer not to use it because there are some times when I might evaluate a field and it gets evaluated outside the context of the array. And if that happens, then it doesn't actually know what the value of num underscore rows is. So it wouldn't return anything, or it would return 0, which would not be very helpful. One of the reasons why I use trip array is that as long as I can see the fields on the form, it doesn't matter whether I can see the individual rows or not. So if I'm outside the context of the array, where num underscore rows wouldn't work in whatever context I was evaluating it, if I use trip array, that wouldn't matter, because if I'm still in the context of the form itself, so I'm outside of the array, but I'm still in the form, well, trip array is a form field. Trip array has a value. That value equals num underscore rows. The nice thing about doing it this way is that if I'm outside the context of the array itself, it doesn't matter, because I still know how many rows are in the array, because trip array itself as a form field stores that value, the number of rows. So it's always accessible. So I'm basically, by putting in trip array here, technically I'm still accessing num underscore rows, but because I'm outside the context of the array, basically what happens is it prompts the array. The array looks, how many rows do I have? And then it returns that value. So this is a more reliable means of doing it. If you know you're going to be in the context of the array, feel free to use num rows, but in general, that's the syntax that I would prefer. So now I've got my start time and my end time. Now I need my departure location. So once again, I'm just going to pull the departure location field, and I only want the field that is in row number 1. It's nice having row numbers where I know I can hard code it. And so it's just going to pull out wherever my original departure location was. Now for my destination location, that's going to get a little trickier. I think we're going to have to open up this text box and we're going to have to expand it out so we can actually see what it is that I'm doing here. In a form field, when I return form field values, and by the way, there are alternate ways of doing this, but this is the way that I did it here. And honestly, I don't know whether I did it here because I'm a moron or because I wanted to show you pattern replace. Because the fields are in an array, they're going to get returned as comma separated values. And by the way, as a default, the very first thing I'm going to see in this list of comma separated values is the comma here. So what I really want to do is I just want to take and I want to replace the destination for the very last one for row number 6. I just want to replace that value. And what I'm actually doing is I'm just building out a set of destinations for each of the array rows. I'll show it to you when we run it. You can see what's going on in trip destination location. We actually did see it a little bit earlier where it gave me a list of those destinations. And you can see how it's formatted, how it doesn't have a starting comma. It's all formatted real nice. We'll look at it. But I'm just taking that destination field and I'm going in and just doing a little search and replace to get just the destinations that I want. And then there's this. We'll come back to this. And then finally, destination 2. I'm just literally showing every field that's in the destination column. I'm just returning it as a comma separated list. I think should have an encoding character here that I didn't put in, but I don't think that's a big deal. Well, because it'll actually get fixed up in the knowledge view, even if I don't, so it doesn't matter. And by the way, none of this is getting displayed to the end users. They don't actually see this. I only need these fields to exist for the calendar KView 1, so I can show the entire time. Now, even though I'm using arrays here, the nice thing about using system variables with array fields is that whenever I query those fields that just use system variables, it only returns 1 row per form instance. It doesn't return 1 row per array row. So that means that so however many rows that I have in this array, it doesn't matter. If I look at calendar KView 2, which is showing me the individual legs, and I'm querying the actual array fields directly, then it's going to show me 1 row for each row in the array. If I query these fields, I'm just concatenating them. By the way, these are fields that are not in an array, so they wouldn't show up as array fields anyway. So technically, I should be able to do this in the knowledge view itself. Technically, I shouldn't need these. I do, but technically, I shouldn't. And in fact, I don't need them to run a knowledge view, as we'll see in a moment. Knowledge view will run fine. If I try to do this in the knowledge view, which I could, and we'll see in a moment, this would all work to create my logical view. It wouldn't work to create my calendar view. And I'll explain that in a minute, because I know somebody's going to say, why are you doing all of this stuff on the form? Why are all these fields here on the form? I could do all of this in the knowledge view. I don't need to waste I don't need to add the overhead for events and and doing the set form datas and then having the extra 6 form fields and then hide them. That's just adding overhead to the form. Why would I want to do that? I'll explain to you why you want to do that in just a minute. Let's take a look at this color field. I'm actually doing something here that I sort of alighted past whenever we looked at the calendar K view itself, which was the color that I want each appointment to show. Now, what I've done here is I've added a little wizardry. There is something called Calendar Colors Webinar, and it's a business rule. So let me reopen the content list here, and let's look at Calendar Colors Webinar. Now, I just added this in for, one of the 37 pieces of flair. Basically, this business rule will, depending on what user I choose, provide a different color for that user's appointments. So I picked Diana earlier. And so when I pick Diana, as I said, she shows up as blanched almond. Rick Robb is plum. I show up as powder blue. Barb Stanley is aquamarine. So it basically looks at the traveler field on the form. And based on who's in the traveler field on the form, it will assign them a special color. You could do this a whole bunch of different ways. You could assign this via groups or whatever you wanted. This just provides a little extra. And notice that it returns a string. The actual string is plum or blanched almond or aquamarine or powder blue. These are all just strings. One of the things that Process Director does whenever it comes time to set color is it will take hexadecimal colors. So for this BP Logix blue right here, 528 BBC would work. For this navy, 082 F4D would work. Yes, I know the central colors for our color scheme in hexadecimal. You probably don't know hexadecimal. However, all HTML colors, well, not all HTML colors, but there are a whole bunch of colors that are called HTML named colors. And so you can actually pass the value for those named colors back, and Process Director will just say, oh, okay, you want to use a named color? We'll set it to a named color. We're kind of used to working in, and we see it almost anywhere, like when we look at the icon, right? You know what? I've never tried this before, and I'm kind of curious to see if it works. I don't think it will, but it might. But we're going to open up the icon chooser. Most of the time in Process Director, we're used to seeing RGB colors. And in fact, in almost any of the choosers where we choose colors, it's going to show us RGB or hexadecimal colors, right? So this sort of steel bluish color is actually 081C61. And so anytime I pick a color, it always gives me the hexadecimal. I'm kind of curious though, now that I'm here, if I can actually use blanched almond as a color and if it works. It does. So there, all of my icons are blanched almond. So it works in the knowledge view. I didn't know if it would work here in the icon picker because it never occurred to me to try it until just now. But yes, you can also apparently in any place where there is that hexadecimal color picker, like the icon chooser, we can literally just put in the name of the color. Now, I will tell you that when you put in the named color and you reopen it, it will reopen it as a hexadecimal. So Process Director will do that conversion from a named color. But if you just want red, you can just type in red. It'll give you a red. So neat to know that that works. So we both have learned something today, that the named colors not only work here in this context and passing that named color to the calendar K view, but it also works elsewhere in the UI. So little bonus for us today. But that's all this business rule does. Takes a look at who the traveler is and returns a custom color based on the traveler. So in the form itself, I kind of like being able to get rid of or pin the content list. I'm learning the V6 UI just as you are. But anyway, this color is just specified by Calendar Colors Webinar. That's just a business rule that provides that color. All right, great. Well, we have all the fields, we have our form, and it gets concatenated. Now, let's take a look at something we can't do. I would like to be able to do it. And I think today I'm going to put in an enhancement request to make this happen. But let's go back here and honestly, let's go back to 100% zoom so I can kind of see everything here. Let's look at Calendar KView 1 Alt. Let's go to the columns tab here. Now, what I want you to note, and now that we're here, let's go ahead and make this bigger again. So the question that I posed a minute ago, okay, why have all of those extra form fields? Why can't I just do all of this in the knowledge view itself? Well, that's a very good question. Because I can, in fact, create a knowledge view that does that. I can do all of this concatenation in the knowledge view. So there's my departure time, row num1, the arrival time for the last row, the trip array, my departure location, and then of course the destination field is just the array field that shows all of the destinations. So like the trip I just took for Diana, the destinations would be San Clemente, Laguna Beach, Oceanside. Those were the destinations she went to in her 3 legs of her trip. All this works fine right now. And in point of fact, if I hit update and run, it works fine here as well on my Calendar KView. So here is Diana Stewart's trip that we just did. So trip number 65 started at 9:30 a.m., ended at 5:15 p.m. That concatenation looks good. She left Oceanside. She went to San Clemente, Laguna Beach, Oceanside. Her color, blanched almond. Everything here looks fine. This concatenation that we have done, including adding in the Calendar Colors webinar business rule, it just passed all the values we needed. It concatenated everything. This looks great. What looks less great, however, now that I have my knowledge view and everything looks wonderful. So up to this point, I'm thinking I don't need all those concatenation fields on the form, right? Not exactly. Problem comes in when I go here to my Calendar KView and nothing appears. I can tell you why nothing appears, and you're not going to like it. And I didn't like it yesterday when I built this because I thought, why am I doing all of this? Because I thought, why am I doing all of this stuff in the form when I can just concatenate it all here? And after I did that, and someone reminded me, and I said, hey, this doesn't work. And they said, yes, it doesn't work. I then remembered 2 or 3 years ago, I tried this and, oh, it's not going to work. And here's why it's not going to work. Look at our trip start and our trip end fields. They look great, don't they? I mean, they look like dates and times. What could possibly be wrong with these? What's wrong with it is that they only look like dates and times because they are not, in fact, date fields. They are text fields. And whenever we go to the calendar is expecting an actual date value. This is not a date value. So while everything looks good, and I could certainly create this Calendar KView, and it works exactly the way I want it to work, and it only shows me 1 row for each form instance, and I can concatenate all of these array fields. This is all great. The fact is, these 2 date fields are not going to work because they are not, in fact, date fields. They're just text fields. They're just strings of text. Process Director doesn't know that they're dates, and so therefore it can't show them in the calendar. This irked me so much that I will be putting in an enhancement to check this field, and if it is not a date field, to force a conversion of the text, because we do this almost everywhere else in Process Director. So we're going to force this conversion of this date into this text rather into a date, so that I can do this sort of concatenation inside the knowledge view. The way that I've done it works, and it's fine, I suppose, as far as it goes. But as mentioned, it does add some overhead to my form. I do have to jump through these hoops in terms of running a set form data action, having the extra fields on the form, and so that they can be tracked as status fields or concatenation fields, and ultimately hiding them in a section on the form. It's inelegant. It works. However, on the plus side, they are actual fields on the form. And so when I look at my start time and end time fields up here, these are date fields. These are date pickers. The concatenated start time and end time, again, are date pickers. So when I query the form fields directly, I don't have to worry about conversion to text. They're date fields. They're stored as date fields with date values, and they get read as date fields when I run the calendar knowledge view. All right, so let's look at the calendar knowledge views themselves. And there's a couple of different ways I can do this. I am ultimately going to build one, but we're just going to go through the configuration for these existing knowledge views, and then I'll whoop one up for you from scratch. So this is Calendar KView 1. Both of these knowledge views are going to have very, very similar configurations. In fact, I think I built Calendar KView 1 and then just copied it and made some changes to the configuration. So it becomes real easy to do once you've built the first Calendar KView. So the first thing I want to do is associate them with the form. So on the Properties tab, I'm going to need a calendar form there. On this tab, there's not really much that I need to do, except to ensure that they are, displayed in grid. And beyond that, I don't really have to do much. On my Options tab, I've turned really everything off but form instances. So the only thing this will return is form instances of the trip form. Then I get to my columns. Now, one thing I do need to do is do a little concatenation here for my trip. Now, this particular knowledge view, we're going to query the actual array fields themselves. So we do know that for each row in the array, it's going to be a separate row in the knowledge view. And because it's a separate row in the knowledge view, it's thus going to be a separate calendar entry whenever we create the calendar entry. So what I've done is I've just concatenated some text that will show up. I need to have some label that's going to show up on the calendar itself that tells me what that trip is, who took it, where they went. And so I've just used some system variables here. Trip, it's the trip number for traveler from trip start to trip end, from trip depart location to trip destination location. So I'm going to take these 6 fields, and I'm just going to concatenate them into text, and that will be my name column. For the rest, all I've really got to do is just apply form fields. So these are all of my array fields. Well, obviously trip number and traveler aren't array fields, but trip start, trip end, trip depart location, trip destination location, those are all array fields. And then color is again a non-array field. It's one of the hidden fields at the bottom of the form. Technically, I don't need to include this as the field. Technically, I could just hit the business rule directly rather than querying the form field. Either way works. I think if you are going to already use the business value on the form, and you're going to, or not the business value, the business rule. If you're going to query the business rule from the form, and you're going to store whatever text value gets returned by that business rule on the form, then inside the knowledge view, there's no reason to go out and requery the business rule again. I've already got the value. It's already been stored on the form. I'm already opening up the form to pull form field values. So the most efficient way of configuring your knowledge view is to grab the value just out of the form field. I'm already querying a whole bunch of form fields. So I've already had to open the form instance. I've already got to look in, retrieve those form values. And I can, by the way, as I said earlier, I can not pick a form field. I can literally go to business rules, go to calendar webinar, and pick the value of calendar colors webinar. And it will return the appropriate value based on the user who is set as the traveler. This will work, but you are adding some extra overhead. Look, it's not a huge amount of extra overhead to grab that business rule and return the value, but it is some. I'm not sure that you could measure it in human time, but on the general principle of doing things as simply as we possibly can in the most efficient way, using the fewest system resources, your best shot here is to actually pull the color off of the form field. Don't query the business value separately. Now, notice I did do that in the calendar KView alt. We can't tell that it worked other than when we looked at the alternative version of this, the colors actually showed up in the logical view. So it works, but the most efficient thing is just to pick the color off the form. All right, great. Well, I've done that. I don't really have any filters here. So let's take a look at what I have to do for my calendar. First of all, I have to set the initial view. I believe the default is week. That's generally the best view. Doesn't really matter because when you run the calendar, you can pick your own view. This is just a default view that will be displayed when the calendar is first shown. If I begin to configure this, I'm going to get a calendar icon automatically at the top of the knowledge view. So just keep that in mind. The calendar does not show by default. I actually have to click the calendar button to turn it on and to see it. But just so you know, as I configure this, it creates the calendar icon at the top of the knowledge view. If I just run it real quick, there's my calendar button, and that's what invokes the calendar view. And then, of course, like I said, we're showing week here. Obviously, I can show it by day, week, month. I can even show it in a timeline view, although I'm not entirely sure. I would need a lot more travel records with more dates and more links to make the timeline make a lot of sense. But you know, here's my timeline. It takes one day. It fills my entire timeline. I do note that I've got a lot of text here. That's something you have to look out for if you have a lot of text. Obviously, if you look at it at the month view, it's with so much text, it's going to be iffy looking. It looks fine in the week view because all this text is meaningful. It looks fine in the day view, again, because it's meaningful. But once you get to month and timeline, you may want to think about how much text you're throwing in here. I'm loading a bunch of text into this particular field. I have the initial calendar view date. By default, if you don't put anything in here, this will actually show you the current date. But if you want to specify a date, you can. I think in most cases, you do want to show the current date. So I have this blank so that whenever I open it, it shows me what's going on now. But obviously, if you wanted to show a specific date, that would be where you would set it. You do need to use a properly formatted date to make this work, to actually show you a date. So properly formatted, I think, depends on the culture setting that you have for your user account. So just keep that in mind. For the rest, it becomes very simple. I've really only got these three fields that I care about. Well, in my case, I have four. I have color that I care about. But now I can specify which columns in the knowledge view I can use for each of these four attributes. I have a name column in the knowledge view. Obviously, that's the column I want to use for the start date. Similarly, trip start and trip end, those are the dates for the start date and the end date. And then the color just uses the color field to show me whatever the color is supposed to be for that particular user. So with that in mind, that's really all that I have to do to create the calendar K view. Now, what I did, as I believe I mentioned earlier, is I just did a little copying and pasting to redo the columns just a little bit. I also renamed them slightly, and I changed the fields that I use. Now, instead of querying the fields in the array, I'm now querying those fields that are at the bottom of the array inside the concatenated field section. So the departure location and time, the destination, and the arrival time, those all come from those 4 fields at the bottom of the form. And thus, I end up with the appropriate records inside the calendar. Oh, wait, no, that was backwards. I'm actually querying the array fields now. The other one, I was querying sorry, even I get confused. I was querying the concatenated fields in the other one. In this one, I was querying the array fields. All right, well, we have our data. We know it's there. Let's just build a calendar K view here right now on the webinar. And we can just see how easy it is to build this thing. Since so many of you want me to build things from scratch, I'll do it. So the first thing I need to figure out is what I'm building. We'll call this knowledge view, and we'll just call it webinar. And we'll build our knowledge view. So first thing we'll do, we'll go to our properties. We obviously only want to use that calendar form as our form associated with knowledge view. We're done there. We can go to the configure tab. Not much that we need to do here. Everything is going to show up the way that we want. Our options, obviously, for showing this to end users, we want to turn all of this stuff off except for form instances. So we're just going to shut everything down there. Then we'll go to our columns. And before I start making columns, I'm going to go ahead and just do a quick update here. Just to be sure that all of the previous configuration I've made is saved. So I've got my name field. And I am just going to make this. Now, what it wants to show me is the object name. And that is fine in most cases, showing me the object name. But because we're pulling a form, the object name that's going to be shown is the name of the form instance, whatever its instantiated form name is. And I don't want to do that here. I want to get a little more specific. So I need to turn this into a string, and I need to format this string with the information that I want. So and I'm not going to go too far into this, so we'll say trip. And okay, it will be good to know what the actual name of the form field is I want. Trip no is the field I want. So I want the trip number. So I want trip no, trip depart lock, trip dest lock, or traveler. Let's just go with trip number and traveler. Let's not make this harder than it has to be. So once again, we'll go back to string again. Value. Okay. Where's my string? There it is. Value string. So trip, and we'll go with trip no. In fact, let's get rid of that colon, and we'll just go trip number, and we won't worry about destinations. Trip number, whatever, and we'll just go with, and I think I spelled traveler with just one L. I didn't spell it with a W, however, but I do think I spelled it traveler. So this is going to be our name, trip number, whatever, for traveler. I hit cancel, didn't I? Value string. Try again. Trip number. Trip no for traveler. And obviously something gets misspelled as it always does. So trip number for traveler. Now we'll hit OK, and we should get trip number for traveler. And you know what? Let's just do a real quick test just to be sure. Trip number 11 for, all right, great. That's the text that I want. Looking good. So now I need a couple of things. Remember, I need to show my start time, my end time, my color, and we'll just set that up because, and by the way, we could just use we're going to use the array fields to start off with. Then we'll copy it and do something different. So we'll go, we'll call it from, and we'll call this one to. Actually, I don't even think I need the from and to just to create the calendar. I have a lot of extra stuff there. But what I do need is start and end. And those will both be fields. I'll just grab those fields. So form field, and that will be trip start, I believe. And the end will be trip end. Form field, trip end. I think those are the correct fields. And you know what? Let's just drop the color on here just to give us a color. Form field. And we'll pick our color field. Okay. And honestly, while I have a lot of other stuff in that knowledge view, to generate the calendar, I don't technically need it. It's not going to be super informational when I update and run this, because it's just going to be the trip name, and it's going to give me the start and the end, and of course the color. My other one is absolutely more informative, but I'm just putting in what I need to make the calendar work. So we'll go to the calendar tab. We'll set this for a week. We'll leave the initial calendar view date blank. Our column for our subject will be name. Column for our start date will obviously be start. Column for end date will be end. And the color will be color. So now when I update and run this, assuming everything runs properly here, there my calendar works. I picked the wrong fields. So I picked the wrong fields for, I picked the concatenated fields. So it's giving me the entire length of my trip. So picking the right fields is important, but this works. Now, all I have to do at this point is save it. And I'll go into my calendar form. Oh, nope, that's not what I wanted. I wanted to go to my folder there. I'm just going to copy, and I'm going to copy this here. It's called webinar copy. I'm going to call it webinar 2. I'm going to keep everything the same. All I really have to do is go in here and change my trip start and my trip end. So departure time, I think, from trip array. That was really important to notice whether I was using array fields or not, wasn't it? I didn't notice because, obviously when I'm talking, I get all higgledy-piggledy. However, I do have this label here that tells me whether I'm using an array field or not, and even tells me what array I'm using. So I have a field departure time and another field arrival time. All I really have to do is change these two fields. And then when I run my knowledge view, it's now going to show me all of my multiple rows because I'm now using the array fields, which I thought I was picking earlier, but clearly was not. But now I am. And so I can see that I have 2 rows in the array for the trip that I built yesterday. And I've got 3 rows in the array for the trip that we built during the webinar today. And when I go to my calendar view here, I can see all of the legs of my journey. So the actual configuration to talk about calendar K-views is actually not a discussion about the K-view. It's actually a discussion about the form. The calendar K-view itself is pretty simple. Assuming that I have actual date fields, not just text that looks like dates, as we saw earlier, and assuming I have a name column somewhere, I'm pretty good to go for my calendar. I mean, I don't actually need a color. I mean, the default for color is no selection. It works. I really only need 3 things. I need a name, a start date, and an end date. And my calendar K-view runs just fine. Now, obviously, without a color selected, my calendar is going to be awful and boring, and it's going to have this super ugly gray color, which doesn't make me happy in any way, shape, or form. But the calendar works with only needing basically a name, a start date, and an end date. That's all I need. But these do have to be date fields. So picking a date field on a form works. Trying to concatenate a string like I did in calendar K-view alt will not work. So that's just one thing to keep in mind. I got to have 2 date fields to start and end, and I got to have a name of some sort. Other than that, everything else is super easy. It's no problem to generate this as long as I have a start and end date. That's really, that and the name is really all I need. So it's super simple. All of the heavy lifting has to be done at the form level. And as we saw, there's some extra overhead that it requires on the form to make all of that work. Other than that, though, calendar K-views really aren't all that hard. And because they're not all that hard, I don't really have much else to tell you about them today. So now we know how to do a calendar K-view, although it appears largely we learned how to configure a form to run the very simple calendar K-view configuration. And with that, we're done. Have a great week. I am going to be returning you a good portion of the balance of today's webinar time to you. So please use it wisely. We will see you next week. Have a great weekend. Have a great week next week. We'll see you next Thursday. So long.